Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to episode 79 of Trail Society, produced by Free Trail, brought to you by The Feed. I'm Corinne Malcolm.
I'm Keely Henninger.
And I'm Hillary Allen.
And apparently, we're at the age where all of our friends keep getting married. I just made it through back-to-back wedding weekends, and then I was like on my flight yesterday and saw that Keely was also at a wedding this past weekend. So, Keely, what have you been up to before we hear where in the world Hillary is located currently?
Yeah, I had another family wedding last weekend as well. So we were traveling to the East Coast, but we luckily traveled on Thursday before the absolute dumpster fire happened. And we made it there, but a lot of people actually couldn't come to the wedding because their flights got completely canceled. And it's hard to get from the West Coast to the East Coast in a day without flying. So
Yeah.
kind of a bummer, but yeah, we made it luckily, and it was great to be out that way. It was 90 and raining and thunderstorming all day, so very East Coast,
Very moody.
very moody.
Yeah, we were on Alaska on Friday and home yesterday, and I think Alaska just wasn't as impacted by the Microsoft slash cyber strike, whatever it was, issue. But we had friends that were like greatly impacted by it. I was just on a meeting this morning with some people from Hoka who like they've been they're still in Salt Lake City because they're on Delta and they've like haven't been able to leave for 4 days because of flights being
Yikes.
backed up and canceled. So oopsies. Yeah, not great. You need more snacks to make it through that. Hillary, where in the world are you currently located?
I'm in Annecy, France, not attending weddings. But yeah, I mean, I used to live here. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Actually, this morning I ran into Ruth Croft and Abby Hall. So that was great. A little pleasant surprise. And then some old Brooks teammates. Yeah, on the trail. So yeah, it's great exploring some familiar places and still getting lost on the trails that I got lost on when I used to live here.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. It is kind of that prep for those, August races, people getting ready for UTMB, et cetera, kind of heading, making their way over to Europe. So tis
Oh,
the season in that regard. And tis the season. Training's ramping up for a lot of folks. That means snacks, more
oh,
snacks for everyone. So got
oh
to give
yeah.
some love again to our title sponsor, The Feed, because they're keeping us fueled. They're keeping us topped off. They're keeping us raring and ready to go, to train, to recover, etc. Again, The Feed is that one-stop shop for all your sports nutrition and more needs, if we're being completely honest. Corinne Chalvoy dropped off an amazing commentary care package during Western States that included a bunch of stuff that I'd never tried before to hopefully help me survive that weekend. And you too can get a little bonus credit over at www.thefeed.com/trail society. There you can get a $20 credit to spend every quarter. So $80 over the course of the year. Anyone have any current faves? Any new things people have tried?
Oh my
Normatec
gosh.
boots.
Oh,
Normatec boots.
what?
Whoa, big spender.
I
Fancy.
know. It's like a travel. I brought it with me. Like I pretty much I think I brought a week's worth of athletic clothes and then the rest of it was recovery tools. So thank you to the feed for that. And I just placed an order from here in France and using like the distributor that's now here in Europe. So not everything is available, but still I get to try some new things that are. And yeah, sorry, Keely, I
Nice.
cut you off. You go.
Oh, no worries. That's exciting. I love my Normatex.
Same.
Yeah,
We
it's
just
Um,
we just got a new plug-in for ours because we've got a super old pair that USA Cycling helped us get like a decade ago, basically, when Steven was racing professionally, and we like they haven't been working for a while, but we got a new connector plug, and now that we're back up and operational.
I know I love just quickly like these ones. It's cool because I can charge them. I actually took them to the Love Trails Festival too, where like it was camping, so I didn't have plugins, but I got to use them because I can charge it and then use it remotely. It's so good.
That's fancy. Okay, sorry, Keely, we keep jumping on you.
oh my gosh, no worries. I ordered the new Kodiak cake muffin mixes
Oh, I
because
wanted
I'm
to.
kind of lazy and I wanted to make muffins. So I got the chocolate chip and the banana. And
Mm.
haven't tried the banana ones yet. Chocolate chip one's awesome. So highly, highly recommend those for those of you who want like pretty good muffin, but like it's very easy to make with minimal additives, which is great.
Nice. We had a lot of Kodiak cake mix at the wedding that we were at as well.
Mm.
Because one of the best men is affiliated with them. And we had we had a couple pancake breakfasts while we were out there via Kodiak cake pancakes, and that was awesome.
Yum. Yeah, their pancakes are so amazing too.
Love it. Okay. Again, you want those snacks? You want Normatec boots, I guess, or you want pancakes or muffin mixes, or yeah, I'm like eating our way out of house and home over here. But again, www.thefeed.com/Trail Society. Go get that credit today. We had to give some results rundowns from the last kind of 2 weeks. Last time we recorded, it was just before Hard Rock, and we were like, well, something's gonna happen there. We don't know what yet. So we had to give a shout out to the runners who made their way around that very, very hard loop. And it was really cool to see both the men's and women's course records get broken. Courtney DeWalter gets the three-peat. And while she got her three-peat, she also broke her own course record. While the nearly 49-year-old boy wonder, Ludo Pomeray, who, by the way, is like an air traffic controller in Geneva, like that's his real job, which I think is so cool. Professional runner for Hoka, wins the men's race by a wide berth, breaking, I think, the directional record. I don't know if that was the overall course record. I think it was just the directional record because there's an overall record plus the clockwise versus counterclockwise record, but broke Killian's record at almost 49, which is just really impressive and so cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
and
it was also really cool to see Courtney push. It seemed like she was actually like struggling a little bit there.
Yeah, she said that it didn't go smoothly, that a lot of it, like she had a lot of moments that were super low and then like would occasionally push because she'd be like, oh, I actually feel good. We got to ride this right now. So
yeah,
what a beast.
Such a strong
I know.
runner.
And I love that race. I like that it changes directions. I've missed it. I've been out there, like I've done the soft rock 3 times, both directions. So it's like, yeah, it's such a cool course. And there's a difference between the directionality of it and how fast it can go. And also snow. But I'm not sure how much they have.
Do we have any update on how many women towed the line this year?
I don't know. They're matching the applicants to the lottery percentages, and they've changed like how the veterans get into the race. Like there's less emphasis on veterans and more. So if you've done it more than 3 times, you're a veteran, I think. So there's less emphasis. They get a smaller portion of the race, and then then basically it's like. Or no, it's they don't do that anymore. It used to be like finisher, veteran, never ever, and they basically did away with the veterans category. So you've either finished the race or you haven't finished the race, and so there's more spots allocated to never evers over the last couple of years than there were previously. And then the wait lists are also gendered. So if a woman removes herself from the start list before the race, then someone from the women's wait list gets in. Versus it being filled in by a guy. And so I don't know the exact numbers for it, but it's been kind of a steady increase year over year by a spot or two. Gina LaCruz is on the board there, which is really cool.
I just figured out the number and it's pretty good this year. Again, it's still low, but there's 26 finishers out of 119 total that are women. So 22% women, which again is not high, but it's higher than it has been.
Yep. Yeah. So they've been working hard on that over there. But yeah, it's a very small start field. So we're working with limited numbers in general there. But what they've done to change the lottery there, I think, is a step in the right direction. It's not perfect. Nothing's perfect, but it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
It's not quite as much of an old boys club as it has historically been. Notice I said not quite. Like hopping over to, I guess, a very different race that I'm going to go to next just because of what they have done. High Lonesome was also this weekend. Caleb Efta and his crew over there intentionally make the race 50-50 for men and women on the start line. He holds spots for people from different marginalized groups. Yitka Fields was there actually running High Lonesome this year. He was a Rising Hearts runner at Western States 3 years ago now, I want to say. So really cool to see what High Lonesome is doing with really pushing their race to be as, I think, inclusive as possible in a historically white, historically male dominated sport. But wanted to give a special shout out to the top 2 women there because they had a battle late into the race, which led to them both going under Annie Hughes' previous course record. And that was McKendry Hickory taking the win. with a late charging Laura Hansen doing a really amazing job there too. And they got the course record in McKendry got the course record in 22:19, with Laura Hansen finishing in 23:06, but the previous course record was 23:40. So they ran really freaking fast. So just shout out to High Lonesome because I think they are doing an amazing job with their race organization and how they're operating there. Caleb's really cool. So thank you, Caleb, and your team for everything that you do. Um, Dropping down in distance, the second stop, or I think the second stop on the National Golden Trail World Series, took place near Keely's neck of the woods at the Y East Trail Fest. There was a 50K associated with the event as well, but the Golden Trail World Series event there is the 28K. Jade Belsberg continues her reign of terror after having a great broken arrow earlier in June, taking the win over Carolina Alacorta and Mariah Bradel. There was only 4 minutes separating first from third. So super tight racing there. The men's side, similarly tight. Good friend of the Portland crew, Liam Miro, edged out Darren Thomas by 1 minute. And Max King was only 3 minutes out of first. So again, yeah, like 3 minutes separating the podium there was super, super impressive.
Yeah, so fun. But Darren must have closed really hard. Yeah, because I think it was Max and Liam out front for a bit. So that's
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, Darren's an excellent descender. I kind of wonder what the back part of that course looked
It
like.
ended with a descent. Yeah.
Yeah, and
So.
I think in comparison to Liam, I think Darren and Max both are probably have better like technical running skills. And so that would play out, I think, on that race course in particular as well.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, but then Speed Goat also happened this weekend, over in the Salt Lake City area, and really special shout out to Jasmine Lowther. Like she hasn't been able to race an ultra since Transgran Canaria in February 2023, so over a whole year. She's been dealing with injury and I believe some like red S type stuff based on what she's put on Instagram. She won the 50K, which is really cool to see her back in action. She's like, I'm learning how to race again. This feels really good. And then Mally Noyes and Cody Clevin were second and third. And it was really tight actually between Mally and Cody for that second and third spot. What was really cool though, David Sinclair, the king of mountain 50Ks, I'm pretty sure at this point, won and set the course record. He's the first guy to go under 5 hours in 4:57, bettering Adam Peterman's 5:04 course record from 2021. And to put it into perspective, Christian Allen, who won the race last year, won in like 5:30 or something.
Yeah.
So running really, really fast. And then right behind him, or not right behind him, but running really well, were two cross-country skiers, Sam Hendry, the Canadian, who's been on the Golden Trail World Series before, and then Scott Patterson, who's probably a lesser well-known name to a lot of trail runners, but the Patterson siblings, Scott and Caitlin, are mega, mega talented, Olympians, more distance athletes. Scott finished third, there as well, which is really cool.
Yeah. I love seeing all these new names too.
Yeah. Last but not least, okay.
Woo!
Hannah, all good. Free Trails own. I think we're all big fans of Hannah. I know that Keely got to spend a bunch of time with her at Transvolcania.
Me too.
Hillary as well. You guys were all in the same hotel, but she won the 100K there. It's her first international win. It was the fastest women's time since 2015. Because I think Iger had a lot of really good talent and then had a couple of years where things were kind of rough and like is now kind of on the up and up again. It's 101K with like 20,000 feet of climbing or something crazy. So huge shout out. Late battle between her between first and second.
She caught her with like 5K left or something, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But I texted her after and her response was just holy smokes.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, that sounds about fitting.
It was actually very hot. Yeah, holy literal smokes. But yeah, super, super cool. And then Americans swept the 50K distance with Jeshrin Small, who was in the top 5 at OCC last year, and Sophia Lockley in her first ever ultra distance event at just over 50K. This will give her entry into 2025 OCC because technically the qualifying window closed at the end of June for people who requested late qualifiers. So we'll see. Maybe we do see Sophia's name on the OCC start list, but technically speaking, per UTMB,
that nice gray area.
Yeah. So it's like we want the most competitive field possible at OCC, CCC, and UTMB if they're going to be the pinnacle event.
Totally.
But we all got to play by some sort of
Yeah,
rules as
I
well.
know. I wanted to pose this question actually for you guys. Did you know that you can request a deferral for a race based off an injury?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Did they make
Yeah.
that known?
Like if you could be in CCC this year type of
No,
thing.
it's like if you're in this year and you want to defer, you could say I'm injured and they'll defer you to next year.
Yeah, I think it depends on your injury. I think that they like
Mhm.
request like medical
Oh, interesting.
documentation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just I didn't know that. I don't feel like they make that super known. And I also feel like no other race does injury. So to me, that's like really weird.
I
But
think it has to be a fairly substantial injury though,
okay.
too. I
Yeah,
don't think
and
it's like you have a niggle. It's like, oh, you broke your leg.
right. Yeah, it's like in the timeline of it too.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Interesting. It's
that's
just
why,
again, I think it's a gray zone. Like they're
yeah.
just like I feel like they're just like they pick and choose.
Yeah. And
Well, but then also,
historically,
what's an injury? Like you're in a
Right.
red S or something like
Well,
this.
I had emailed them and again, I'm not going to do this and I think it's fine, but I basically was like, "Hey, I'm just writing to see like if you'd make an exception to put me into 2026 or 2025 as I start med school and I literally can't make it. It's the week I start." And they're like, "No, but if you would have had an injury, we would have." And it's like I don't know.
yeah.
To me, it's like that's kind of a gray zone. I don't know. Like no
Yeah,
other
but
race does that.
yeah. So I do think it's nice that there is like this kind of injury area where it's like but I've also seen them deny injury requests as well.
Right.
It really kind of depends on what the injury is and the timeline of it. The
Mhm.
other thing too for people to recognize, and I don't know if this will change or not, but basically there were some spring qualifiers, and what that meant though is that before the end of the year, like before the end of December, you had to email them as an elite athlete and say, hey, I was not able to get my qualifier before the end of December. Can I utilize? And you had to request a specific
Mhm.
race. And it was
Mhm.
supposed to be, we all thought it was actually before the end of May. It turned out it was before the end of June. You had to
Mhm.
request, like, but you couldn't just be in that race and then request entry for this year. Like, there was actually an athlete I know who went to Valhalla who thought that they were still like that counted as a qualifier in February. And they're like, no, 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 that only counts if you asked for it to be a qualifier. So like when I initially was maybe to do Tarawera, I asked UTMB for an extension at that point, like at that point in time while I was trying to figure out what I was doing this year. And so, but that extension has to be approved by them. Um, there were actually two athletes who raced Resticonia in early July, 1 week after the extension deadline, who have been granted entry, who apparently asked for that and were granted entry into OCC. And it's like, you got to draw the line somewhere. You told us it was the end of June, but you're letting these two athletes
Mhm.
who raced the first weekend of July use that as their qualifier. Like what are the limitations?
Yep.
So it's clearly still not perfect, and we are
Mhm.
trying to hold anyone accountable. Because again, we want the most competitive field possible, but when you allow specific athletes into the race outside of the qualification system,
Mhm.
or outside of the time. They still made them do a UTMB race, but they didn't adhere to the timeline they gave the rest of us. That like punishes everyone else, but it particularly punishes athletes who have less knowledge, less privilege, less
Mhm.
sponsorship, less ability to go to X, Y, or Z race. Like I think there's just downstream effects to it, and it's never going to be fair, let's say, but we need transparency. And so we got beef still. We still got beef. Sorry, guys. We're working on it. It's not perfect. But there are people who are working on it in a big way. So we'll see if that changes in the coming years. Let's dive into some news. I saw this come up on my Instagram and I thought it was really cool.
Mhm.
Keely, I believe you put it in here, so tell us a little bit about it.
Oh man, it's just a shout out to Knicks. They launched a really cool campaign with some big figureheads in the sports world, basically telling athletes that they'll pay you to talk about your period and how it's impacted your performance. And they kick it off with a video with Megan Rapinoe, and the video is just really really cool. So I just wanted to bring it to the attention to tell people that if you haven't watched it, take a look at it. We'll put the link in our show notes. And I thought it was really clever and a really cool marketing strategy.
Yeah. And then the next piece of the puzzle, we'll go more into, I think, Olympic data
Mhm.
next episode, because there are some cool things happening in the Olympics. Again, the Olympics are not perfect either. But when it comes to like, yeah, there's some big issues. Like the French IOC is not letting athletes compete in hijabs, which like pushes more women out when they're supposed to like have gender gender parity and equality at the Paris Games, 100 years after Paris hosted their first Olympic Games, I want to say. But there are some actions that like kind of directly negate that. And we'll dive into that, I think, in the news next time we all chat. But the Olympics kick off this week, and my Instagram is flooded with athletes getting their kits and trying them on and posting really fun reels about them. And so I'm wondering, as the Olympics get ready to kick off, what are you guys most excited to watch if you're going to watch anything? Anything?
Gymnastics. Gymnastics.
Mm.
I mean, I'm such a huge, I mean, I don't know, the marathon and
Everything.
track, like I can't choose it. I mean, yeah, definitely that. I mean, also, I know it's not the Olympics, but the Tour de France fans I'm excited for that. But yeah, all of those things. Also, I love figure skating. I wish that was a summer sport, but whatever.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, the gymnastic. I'm so excited to watch gymnastics. There's a really fun post that came out with a picture of Simone Biles, and it was like the
Yeah.
Chinese men have put together one of the most decorated teams in history with 27 world championship and Olympic medals between them. And it's like, guess who else
Simone
has
Biles,
27? Is it 27 or 37?
37. She has like
37.
37.
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
was like, guess who else has that many medals? And it was like
One person.
Simone Biles. So
It's just I'm a huge fan of her too, just with like the whole like the mental aspect and how she's been super, public about it. So I think it's really cool to see her back competing on the big stage. And she's accomplished so much and she's still so young.
a good Netflix documentary came out on Simone in like the last 2 weeks. It's also very, very good, kind of like a behind the scenes with Simone Biles. So highly recommend it. Keely, what about you? What you watching?
I would say like specifically the race I'm interested in the track and field realm is the 400-meter hurdles for the women. I feel like Femke Bol and Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone is like going to be an insane race. They're both running dirty fast times right now, and I think that'll be really cool to watch. And then I'm on a tennis kick, so I'm stoked to watch tennis too, because we've been watching pretty much all the majors and it's been really fun.
I'm also excited to watch women's soccer because I think that for the longest time, like the U.S. team in particular has been so dominant, but they're like the evolution of women's soccer has been so mega that I think it's going to be a really cool tournament. And I do believe that the women's soccer finals got the prime spot over the men's soccer finals at this Olympics, which is really, really cool. I remember that happening in the news. I don't know if they held that, but that was supposed to be what happened with the women's soccer final. So that will be very, very excited. And then obviously, Sifan Hassan is doing what no woman is attempting to do what no woman has ever done before, where she will be starting the 1500, the 5K, the 10K, and the marathon at the Olympics. And it's like, it's kind of, in one hand, I think that she would come away with more medals if she wasn't doing that. But who knows? So curious to see how she does there. No one has ever done that. And so who knows what's going to happen. So we'll be keeping our eyes peeled.
I'm so tempted to go take a train to Paris, but then
I have to imagine it's crazy there. I have to imagine like it's expensive and weird.
I know. It's better just like watch it on, well, I don't know. I've got to get a Peacock membership or something.
A Peacock membership with like a VPN so that you can legally watch it from Europe. You're so screwed. So sorry. That's all I'm gonna be doing.
I'll just befriend some French people at a bar or something. I don't know.
Yeah, if you can't get a hold of me for the next 3 weeks, it's because I'm probably watching Peacock Olympic coverage. Okay, we've got to dive into this. And I think doing the honors for our interview today, Keely, you want to introduce our guest?
Sure. Yeah, we have a special one for you guys today. We're so stoked about this one. We kind of thought of this after last episode where we talked about sports bras and thought we'd bring on an expert whose paper we kind of talked about last time. So we're excited to introduce you guys Shalaya Kipp, who was an All-American out of CU Boulder and a 2012 Olympian in the 3,000-meter steeplechase, among other amazing running endeavors. She first got her feet wet in exercise physiology by studying the energetics of the steeplechase and energetics of super shoes at CU Boulder, where she got her master's in integrative physiology. She then went on to obtain her PhD from University of British Columbia in exercise physiology with an emphasis on respiratory system, focusing on the sex and age, and is now currently at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota as a research fellow. One of her latest publications took the running world by storm, focusing on sports bras and breathing mechanics, which is why we were likely saying we have got to talk to her. However, we clearly could discuss anything with her. In this interview, we dive into some of her early work on the development of the super shoe, like the Nike 4% Vaporfly. We talk about her Olympic career and the transition to full-time research candidate and mother. And finally, we dive into her latest work with a deep dive into sports bras. And now I will get out of the way, and we hope you really enjoy our chat with Shalaya.
Hi, I'm Shalaya.
That's it. That's all we
And I'm
got.
here.
It's normally those with the most credibility and like the most accolades who choose to introduce themselves with one word.
Shalaya Kipp. There's
Perfect.
not a lot of Shalayas out there. I can go by Shalaya.
Yeah, you're like
That's very
Beyonce
true.
or Rihanna,
Whoa. Oh, no.
Ooh, there we go.
the artist formerly known as Prince. Okay. So we've said this a bunch on here historically that when we're interviewing folks, it really is clear that we're a summation of all our combined life experiences, i.e., like things that we've done have like somehow gotten us to this like interesting place. So before we dive into like the super interesting work that you do, can you tell us a little bit about how running and science have been on this journey together with you?
Sure. So I think like a lot of athletes, there's an innate interest in understanding yourself. So I started out in exercise science. That was integrative physiology at the University of Colorado. I was also a runner there, ran cross country and track. And specifically, I ran the steeplechase. I got really interested in understanding what was going on in my own body. And so I joined an exercise physiology lab, as a lot of athletes do. It progressed to understanding more specifically about the steeplechase and then more about biomechanics. Um, I continued I continued to keep running. I made the 2012 Olympic team, and then decided I should also stay in Colorado and Boulder longer and do a master's. It was really a kind of a hand in hand. My running career kept going one way, and my science career went another way, and it was just parallel. Um, I'm trying to decide how in depth to tell you of stuff I've done. Got really interested in shoes. So I like applied science. You know, what does shoes do to running economy? Everyone wants to know that. So did some studies at Colorado there. And then I was really getting into the biomechanics side. And there was this girl, Keely, in the lab too, doing some uphill running. And I was like, biomechanics is cool, but I really want to go do some respiratory physiology. I know that's like a complete 180 turn, but I had a lot of questions about the respiratory system, and I know we were doing like lower legs kinematics and stuff, but I was like, breathing's kind of important. After my master's, I left and went to the University of British Columbia, um, and started a PhD. I forgot there's more running stuff going on at the same time. My PhD work was in exercise science, focusing on the respiratory system with an emphasis on sex and age. Um, I'm kind of wondering what I've left out of my trajectory of career.
No, I mean,
Finished
I
my
think,
PhD, that's good.
yeah,
I'm now
graduated,
at the Mayo
done.
Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, and I'm a research fellow here. Um, yeah, I continued running. 2016, I finished fourth at the Olympic trials. If you know about how to make an Olympic team, fourth is not the place you want to finish.
The wooden medal.
I know, right? Yeah. Um, yeah, more teams, but not running a lot recently because I had two babies during my PhD, which is a hard time to have two babies. I had my son during the third year of my PhD, and then I had my daughter right after I graduated. She came a little early and she walked at graduation with me. Um, I think this is my life in a nutshell. Yeah.
I love it. It sounds so easy breezy. I also love that it's like I was also in exercise science, like it was
It,
technically health and human performance with a concentration on exercise science. And everyone in my major were like, we like sports. We don't
yeah,
know what we're doing with
exactly.
this, but we
You're
like sports.
curious. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
You're
I mean,
amongst
I didn't
them.
even find it till my senior year of college, though. Like, nobody told me about exercise science or biomechanics till I was a senior. And then I was like, oh, I could study this. What?
And you realize you have a lot of interest in it.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, exactly.
Just a bunch of nerdy jocks is what we're getting at here.
Yeah.
But you bring up an interesting point. So, I mean, that sounds like super smooth sailing. Something that we've also talked a lot about on this podcast is like identity as an athlete and identity as a person. You mentioned having made the team in 2012 and then missing the team in 2016. Just walk us through a little bit of like how did did that like send you off in one direction? Were you like, well, PhD for sure now, versus like, feeling, I don't know. I think a lot of us can feel like our identities crumble when one piece of it leaves a little bit. And so we'd love to hear a little bit about, that experience and what that meant for you, both as an athlete and as a person.
Yeah, you said that so beautifully too, because running is so much of your identity. And I think that's why I held on to science so tightly, was I knew running wasn't like a sure thing. Like you just don't know what's going to happen on race day. And I didn't want that to be the only thing that defined me. And so I think really, making sure my scientific career was progressing at the same time was important to me. And important and maybe even detrimental, I think sometimes, because in 2016, right, I was doing my master's. I was in the lab a lot, I was pulling long hours. And, is that the best thing for an athlete to do when they're trying to be, in peak form? Probably not. Like maybe should have been on the couch a few more days. But I think I almost couldn't do that from a mental standpoint. Going all in is really scary. And so it was like, yeah, I'm gonna do the science too. Um, so 2016, yeah, it didn't go well. 2017 ended up injured. It definitely trying to overdo it, right? Trying to overcompensate. It's like I didn't make the team. I'm gonna have a, comeback year, and then ended up injured the entire year. 2018, I finished fourth at the US champs again. And 2018, I left and I started my PhD. So yeah, you can kind of see what was happening, right? Like you're getting these suboptimal results, and it's like I'm ready to move on. And so it is the reason I have this scientific identity as well. And I'm happy I did it that way. I wouldn't actually do anything different.
Yeah, I think that's really important. We've talked to a number of individuals who I think are very similar to you in that regard. I think the three of us actually experience that too. We clearly don't just run. We have to do a lot of other things to keep us happy and sane. So I do think that that's very relatable, that it doesn't necessarily need to be the thing that defines you, but it gives you like little rocks to hold on to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Keely, is there something that you want to kind of dig into in that regard?
No, I think just like it resonates so strongly with me because I think that that was my entire life up until like 2 years ago, where I was like, I'm going to go full time into running. And I think it's way harder to go full time into something without that crutch. Right. And I think that's just like really admirable to admit that that was like kind of a crutch for you and still like, pursue your goals and come up short by like one place, which is by all means like still absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah,
But I
making
can
the second
imagine
Olympic team would have been a big game changer.
it
But
would
yeah,
have been a big game changer. Yeah. And I think you put it really nicely in one interview you had where you said like 4 years of my life is summed in 9.5 minutes. And I think that's really hard to digest. But it's like
nine
you're
and a
still,
half minutes was like the steeple link. That's
yeah,
all. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yep. And
No,
Short
but
little distance.
I would say people don't recognize that too, I think, when it comes to Olympic sports in particular. So my husband and I have, I think, three Olympic alternates between the two of us. And it's like you give everything for 4 years and there's no guarantee that you get to be an Olympian
Mhm.
versus um versus I mean, there's no guarantee that you're going to defend your PhD, I guess, but
I was
generally
just gonna say
speaking,
that.
with medical school or a PhD or law school, whatever it might be, you like put in your time, you like check the boxes that are there, and at the end of it, you walk across the stage with a diploma. But like
Yeah,
that is not the same in athletics, where there
one
like
bad
really
day.
is no guarantee.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Oof. Oof, right in the feels over here. Just getting into it this morning.
It's okay.
Um,
I'm happy.
yeah, you're like, I love life.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
yeah.
I guess one thing that we'd love to talk about too before we dig into the science of all this is that you've got a lot on your plate. You're a mama of two. You've got a master's, a PhD. You now work at the Mayo Clinic. My athlete, Mike Schmidt, says hi.
Smitty is awesome. He
Yeah.
is so great. Him and the whole Rochester run community. Oh, they've been awesome. Welcoming us to
Oh.
runs. Yeah.
Yeah, he's phenomenal. He was like, "Do you need an intro?" I was like, "Keely's on it." Um, but you as Keely pointed out in our outline, you've got 35 publications, 1,300 citations, pretty early in your career, and you seem to be balancing it all. Is it really as easy as it
No,
looks?
no, and I would be doing a disservice to women if I made this look too easy. Like, no, it's extremely hard. It's a pick and choose every day. I need to go into the lab, and my son's like, I don't want to go to daycare. I want you to take me. I don't want dada to take me. So no, it's really hard. Mentally, emotionally. You work a full day and then you come home and you have two kids and you're back on, full-time duty. You got to cook, you got to clean. So no, it is hard. And then you want to also run in there too. So I tell people I'll start running more when my baby sleeps through the night. It's like if she's doing 3 wake-ups a night, I can't wake up at 5 a.m. and run because then my brain isn't ready for the day. So no, it's hard. It sounds great on paper, but yeah, no, there's a lot of also failures and a lot of tears. So that's the real side to it all.
Lots of melties.
Yeah, a lot of meltdowns.
Yeah. I mean, we've interviewed a lot of running moms on Trail Society, and I feel like we love diving into how, like, just emphasizing how unique everyone's journey through motherhood is. So do you mind just like walking us through your journey through motherhood with both children and how that might have changed and how it might have impacted your like career as a scientist and your career as a runner?
Yeah, and within, like my 2 pregnancies were so different. With my
Mhm.
son, I was really uncomfortable running during pregnancy, but then postpartum, I like bounced back in no time. Like
Mm.
5 months postpartum, I was already getting back up to 60 miles a week. I was like, this is great. And then my daughter was completely different. Running was actually really comfortable with her. And then postpartum, she like wrecked my body. Like it took 9 months until I could even try a workout. Like I'm finally back running 7 days a week. Like that's a win. So just so different. The other thing I think about a lot is, and I'm really happy we celebrate these moms that, come back and they were like, she was 5 months postpartum, she's, 10 months postpartum. And we celebrate that and that's fantastic. But we need to make sure that people understand that's not the norm. Like
Mhm.
that's great, but if you're not reaching that level, like you're doing fine on your own. Like if it takes you 2 years, that's okay. If you bounce back right away, that's okay. Like it is so varied. And don't look at some of these elite athletes as your target goal.
Mhm. Yeah, we have a lot of that in trail and ultra running too, where somebody might complete an ultra 3 months after they
Yeah,
had a baby. And there's no
people can
denying
do
that
it.
is absolutely incredible. But
Yeah,
yeah, that's not the norm. And I think that's the tricky part with navigating this postpartum journey is like looking at other people who can run 3 months postpartum and trying to be like them and not listening to your own body and your own demands and then maybe ending up injured or something like that where you're actually, unable to run or compete or anything like that. Yeah, it's
100%.
it's so tricky. And I'm glad that there's more, science in this space now and hopefully more future research coming in postpartum training and return to run. But it's still like such a like desert land, right? Like there's
It's
no
so hard
kind
to
of research to
navigate.
navigate.
Yeah,
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 exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. So crazy. But in general, I love how you bring science into like kind of all aspects of your own life, like always
I'm a
testing
nerd.
your own experiments. Yeah. And you always talk about your own experience. Like recently you were talking about stroller running and how that like what the implications of that are from a metabolic cost, which again, I think people don't talk about and maybe don't give enough credit to that, like, hey, you might be breastfeeding and you're running with a stroller and you're not sleeping. Like, what is the
It's
energy demands tied up in that?
it's huge, right? Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Uh-huh.
How
Well,
hungry
wasn't
you are
there
breastfeeding too.
that like study that came out recently or that headline that like went viral that was like we finally determined the metabolic cost of pregnancy
Breastfeeding.
or of breastfeeding, and it was like, yeah, I think we've known this for a while. We just haven't put like an actual value
Mhm.
assigned to it. So, yeah, it's good to see things slowly moving in that
I'm so
direction.
happy. Yeah. I'm like, more of this,
Yeah,
please. Yeah.
it's so nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so we all know that, well, nobody knows this. I met you when we were both working for Dr. Crom.
Yeah.
Everyone here knows this.
We were at the
Um,
University of Colorado together, working in a
yeah.
biomechanics lab together.
I left before pursuing a master's. You went on to pursue a master's and a PhD. Very different trajectories post this, but it was lovely to be able to spend that year with you.
Yeah.
And I think it was so cool that you started studying the steeplechase while also doing the steeplechase. It was such a novel study of the time. But then to your previous point, you started talking about how you started getting really interested into super shoes. And it was really cool to see you get to work with Walter and that team to be able to do a lot of those studies around the Vaporfly and the 4% and all of the running economy and biomechanics related to that shoe. I kind of want to start there because our running like community and trail and ultra running is kind of enveloping the super shoe right now. There's a lot of trail running super shoes coming out, and I think there's a lot of nerds that listen to this podcast. Nerds is a good thing, don't worry, guys. That would want to know kind of like an expert's take on how the shoe might be beneficial to runners doing ultra distance races or trail races. And so just wondering your like professional opinion of like, what do you think some of the biomechanical implications and physiological implications are of the super shoe in terms of our sport?
Yeah. And you guys get into a really different realm of running, which I love to think about. So I should say, like when we studied these super shoes, it's all really lab based, right? It's all on a treadmill. And actually, when we started studying the shoes in 2016, super shoes didn't exist yet, right? So we actually had these really ugly prototype shoes. And I like to emphasize that because people like now they say, oh, but these in the study, they knew they were putting on super shoes. Like they like it was placebo. I'm like, no, super shoes didn't exist. And they were an ugly prototype, like
Yep.
versus out of the box Nike Streaks and out of the box, Adidas Boost. Like, so actually some of the runners told us they didn't like the shoe, even though that they were becoming more economical while running in it. But as I go off on a tangent, what I was saying is all of it was done on a treadmill, right? Super smooth, level ground, constant speed, which is not what you get in an ultra race. Um, but could it still benefit you in an ultra race? My thought was I think it actually really would, as long as it's not too technical and as long as you still
Mhm.
had some tread on the shoes. Um, what that would do over the course of 50, 100 miles, whatever kilometers you'd like. I just came from Canada and I still can't convert to kilometers that well yet. Is what we knew about some of the metabolic savings is that when you get down to the slower speed, you actually see a bigger performance boost.
Mm.
So while we were really interested in the sub 2 hour marathon, a 4% savings really was down to like 1.5% performance. But when you get to those slower speeds that you might see in an ultra, that 4% is actually a much bigger magnitude of performance benefit. So I think it could. Should you be wearing them all the time? How it changes your biomechanics, how it changes your foot, what muscles get used. So much to unpack there. Keely, were you about to say something?
Oh, I was gonna just jump in, and
Oh,
I feel like there was some research that looked at like level running versus uphill running versus downhill running, and it seemed like that was another realm in which the shoes didn't always give back quite as much as as that return might be. How might that be expanded upon in a say that there are a number of trail races that are rail trail, right? They're basically like a gravel path or something that's very non-technical that we could see even like a super shoe potentially perform well on. But when you talk about like level running versus uphills or downhills, like how might that play in to deciding on a super shoe or not?
yeah. So how much elevation gain is in the course?
Hmm.
Yeah, a study out of Roger Crom's lab by Clarissa Whiting looked at some uphill running, I know for sure. And yeah, that magnitude of savings was decreased, I believe. I would still say you have a magnitude of savings, and that's maybe the key part.
Mhm.
If your foot can adapt to the shoe, if you gradually go into the shoe, you don't want to be using, a traditional shoe and then on race day just jump into a super shoe. I'd say make sure that you're doing slow adaptation. Your foot's getting used to that shoe. Your mechanics are getting used to that shoe. Um, but I would say a savings is savings. If you're really interested in performance, that's my hot take.
No, I agree with you. I think my only thing that like limits myself from using the shoes is that I have like pretty bad eversion to begin with. My ankles are just crap, and the shoes like typically increase eversion rate very drastically. And for me, I wear the shoe too much and my foot is like, nope.
See, and you know that from trying out the shoe. You know that from
Mhm.
like small micro doses of it.
Yep.
Yeah, so
And
individualized, right?
right,
Yep.
that's the same for me too. I have a different, I think just my tibias are a little bit bowed. And so actually my doctor at CU, Dr. Moon, he's a orthopedic surgeon, and he was looking at some different super shoes and different brands and seeing how that would work and influence certain biomechanics for different people, like people's anatomy basically. So yeah, I think it can be so individualized. There's so much that goes into it. And then also you mentioned like the technicality of the trail. I've noticed just from running in an old North Face version of some super shoes that it didn't work so well on, in my opinion, on those.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking for that, that midsole to actually be able to compress and that midsole to store the energy and then, return it. And if you're not actually going to use the shoe in that way, what's going to happen? And that's why I say the caveat is this is all done on treadmills. Someone should
Right.
go take a
Mhm.
Cosmet and go out into the real world. I get it's hard to control those variables, but yeah, kind of hard to know on some different.
Yeah, calling Nicola, you should
Yeah, I know.
throw in the super shoe
Right.
into your study. What are you doing? You're slacking.
Yeah.
I guess a question to add there too is I don't know if it's like if there's anecdotal evidence or any like robust studies that have been done. I mean, shoes are still so new, I think, in a lot of ways that we haven't seen like great longitudinal studies or kind of respective studies looking back at what might have happened there, but just like thinking about injury or injury risk, for example. Like obviously, if you have weird lower leg biomechanics, maybe you're at an increased risk. But I'm wondering if you've come across anything either anecdotally or substantiated that might tip some people one way over the other,
Yep, that's the $1 million question, isn't it?
right?
And I told you, these shoes came out in 2016. So, we're not even 10 years into using them. They weren't really on the market until, 2018 or so. And people, really didn't adopt them until after. Um, I hear every which way. One of the things I think about is we love to blame shoes for injuries. So much
Yes.
goes into an injury. You guys know all this, right? Are you actually recovering? Are you eating enough? There's so many other little things, and it's just so nice to blame a shoe. I think that's why people do it, and it can correlate really well. Well, I rested and then I changed my shoes, and now look, I'm running great. And so it's really hard to study injuries. And that's all I have to say. It's totally potential, right? A lot of people do change their shoes and it makes them healthy for life and it's great for them. Um, but yeah, knowing that on a large scientific scale, I don't think we have that data yet.
Yeah. Maybe last question on super shoes before we dive
Okay.
into the real meat and potatoes here and talk about breathing and sports bras. But this is a personal curiosity of mine. And
Okay.
this is just your personal opinion. You can take your many graduate degree hats off here. Parker Valby running in the like modified super shoe with spikes for NCAA championships. Like, do you like, I don't know when you saw that, because I think many of us saw it and we were like, oh, interesting. Like, interesting move, doubling in the 5K, 10K. Do you have any like personal opinions on an athlete like Parker Valby and the NCAA is doing something like that?
Okay, so my first this and I've taken all my hats off.
Yeah, all the
My
hats are
first thought
off.
is I'm actually for shoe technology, like improving. Letting an athlete choose the shoe that's best for them, I think is what we should do. I don't like all these shoe regulations. There was a study that came out of the lab Keely and I were in that looked at different midsole thicknesses, and it found that some people responded better to 10 millimeter foam and other people responded to 20 millimeter foam. And and when we cap, stack height, we've kind of set a limit. And I think why do we set that limit? It's a whole spectrum for people of where they're gonna, operate best. And there's also a safety thing, maybe somebody actually does need that for, bone protection or something. And so the first thing I want to say is I'm okay with, shoe technology improving. Like I like science. Like that's what scientists were trying to do at Nike. They want to make, better shoes. They want to improve performance. And then when we start putting limitations on it, it kind of makes me a little sad. Okay, so Parker Valby choosing to use a like super shoe with spikes. I love it, right? Like this is
Mhm.
getting creative, and that's what science is all about. She goes, okay, I actually want to actually have a little more, speed in this 10K, but I also want to get some of, um, that propulsion from the midsole. So, like let's get creative with this kind of spike. And I'm for that. Maybe that midsole also helps her with recovery, less muscle breakdown. She's going to be more fresh for the 5K. Um, so yeah, I'm okay with any shoes, and I know that's not always a popular opinion. Um,
Okay, we support non-popular opinions just as much as popular opinions.
Yeah,
it's an
I
opinion to take, like shoes have
I
been progressive
regularly rant.
since the beginning of time. Like let's let it keep
Yeah,
going. It
totally.
keeps athletes safe and healthy as well. Shoes are good.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of sad that in order to choose a shoe that's more optimized for her body, we'll say she had to also forego like the time she ran, right? Because it was
Yeah,
like
like
disqualifying.
what
So yeah,
what in
it's a
the world are we
tricky.
doing? It makes running harder to spectate and understand. Like let's not do that to the sport either.
Mhm.
Anyways, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
It kind of,
digress.
yeah, we digress.
I digress a lot.
But I did want to say one thing in relation to injury is I think the only study that's ever been like consistently replicated is that there's no way to predict injury. The only thing that causes it is running. Like,
Or having a previous injury is the best
yeah.
predictor of a future injury. Like, yeah,
It's
I've tried to
like,
do some
yeah,
injury studies and it's
yeah.
it's really hard.
Yeah, we had a lot at Nike and it was always like, it's more just how much they run. Shoot.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So many
but
factors.
talking about energy savings, another piece of equipment that may save some ladies some energy is the sports bra. So let's dive into that for a bit because I know a lot of our listeners are stoked to talk about that. So first of all, like everything, like what caused your curiosity in this field? I remember talking about breasts and sports bras back in like 2022 with you
You and I
while I
chatted
was at
about it.
Nike. Yes. But then unfortunately I couldn't really advise you on anything because Nike's very strict with those things. But boy, did I want to. So I'm curious what prompted kind of all of this curiosity around this space.
Sure. So, like I told you, I went up to University of British Columbia to do my PhD. I was in a respiratory science lab that studied exercise. And as you can imagine, like a natural athlete, I had a lot of curiosity. You know, you're out for a hard run and you're really ventilating, like, and it's like you can feel that sports bra around your thoracic cavity. And it's a really natural question to be like, is this actually impacting my breathing? You know, am I reducing some of my pulmonary function by having a, kind of a tight sports bra on? And so it's kind of a natural question I had, and I bugged my advisor about it. It was during the pandemic, so we weren't doing research. Um, but the other thing is in Vancouver is Lululemon's headquarters. They are literally down the road from us. And they reached out to my advisor and said, hey, we have some money. We'd like to collaborate on a study. And he said, great, I got someone for you. And he put us in touch. And it was a really collaborative process talking with them, kind of here's what we'd like to do, here's what we can do. What resources do they have for us? They provided all the bras, they provided funding for the study. That's really important for science. Scientists can't do studies without funding. I really wanted to measure what that underband pressure was. This is me just rambling, so I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, keep
So
going.
they actually built a little pocket into the bra. And so we actually have what that resistance was on the chest wall cavity, because that was important to me. I didn't want to just say tight and loose. Like I wanted to have numbers for that. What was this if you want to replicate our study? How much restriction was on that thoracic cavity? I also and you guys already talked about the study and you guys did a fantastic job. They had esophageal balloon catheters that went up their nose, down into their esophagus, gives us an estimate of pleural pressure. I realized that you can't actually change bras when you have like tubes coming out of your neck and it's like taped to your arm. So I told them that we needed it to be adjustable on the participant. So they used eye and hook mechanisms so we could make a really tight bra and then like a really loose bra as well, without having the subject go and change in between trials. Um, this is where I've forgotten what I was talking about. But yeah,
No,
so
just talking about your curiosity, right? It's
okay,
so
yeah. So
interesting
the
because
crux of my whole question was like during both maximal and I'm also always interested in submaximal exercise. If I make a really tight bra on myself and then I make a really loose bra on myself, within a subject, within a day, what kind of changes do we see in VO2, so your energy or your caloric consumption, and then what actually changes at VO2 max as well? So I'll just get to the punchline of the results. And you guys already covered this, so this is just again. During submaximal running is what I think is maybe most interesting for your crowd, because if you're out doing an ultra, some sort of trail race, you're not going to be running at VO2 max for 9-10 minutes straight. You're running at some fraction of your VO2 max. So that's probably the most interesting. And what we found is when you let women come in and they self-select their bra. So some women came in, they're like, I know I'm a Lulu 6, or, I know I'm a Lulu 8. We let them self-select it. We set it to what that manufacturing bra would be, and then we tighten it. And then compared to the self-selected to the loose is where we found that they had energy savings, which to me meant that women were coming in, they were likely picking a bra that was a little too tight. And if we loosened it, no one had any complaints about, you have a lot of breast movement and you can get boob slap. No one had any complaints about that. So it was a loose condition that was, something that somebody could actually go out and, wear. And when you loosened it, we saw an average of, I'm going to forget it, 1.3% savings. And it sounds small, but every fraction counts. And I think Keely even mentioned in 2 episodes ago that I did the calculations. If you're saving 2% over a 3-hour marathon, it translates to, a couple minutes of performance benefit. And so if you think about that, over, 8-10 hours, it could be, we're talking now, 5-10 minutes or so. So it's small, but it really can add up. Breathing pattern also changes. When we're in a really tight bra, we tend to take really shallow breaths and really frequently. And then when you loosen it, people start to take these bigger breaths and less frequent. Okay, I'm going to stop in case you guys had questions because that was a rant.
Yeah, it's great though. I think we covered a lot of kind of the what we needed to hear about the study. It's funny. I think I also reached out to you when I was a graduate student up at Simon Fraser, or I was trying to go to Simon. I was trying to actually go into Michael Cole's lab, but he was on sabbatical. So I
I
reached
hope
out
I
to you.
responded.
I think I reached out. No, I think I'm pretty sure we did because I was interested in
Okay.
your advisor as well. And then Michael Cole was gone on sabbatical, and I ended up at Simon Fraser, and we did
Yeah.
a project with Lululemon as well. And they're
Yeah.
super, they're amazing
They're
to
super
work with
great. Yeah.
because they'll be like, oh, you want us to 3D
Mm.
print this thing for you to put in between layers of
Hey.
clothing to gather climate? Like, cool.
Yeah,
They're
sure.
awesome.
Yeah, companies that support science. I
Yeah.
love it. Yeah.
More of that, please. I think one thing kind of going backwards a little bit in the study would
Yeah.
just be like like one of the Instagram videos that I think, rocked our socks was you showcased inserting the balloon catheter like through your nose and down your esophagus. We did a lot of that in my lab as well because we were doing temperature stuff.
Yes,
So
yeah,
we did
esophageal.
NG
Those are
tubes.
actually a little worse than
Mm.
what I do. Those are a little thicker because
Yeah,
I put those in with balloons, but
they're uncomfy. No, no, thank you. But talk a little bit about how that helps to measure internal pressure.
uh yes.
Sorry.
So yeah, it's a balloon cath. No. Yeah. So it's a balloon catheter. It goes up in the nose. We numb them. We give them lidocaine. It's
Mm.
okay. It feels like a piece of pasta in your back of your throat. But when you have both that pressure that those respiratory muscles are generating, as well as the volume of air you're breathing in and out, with a pressure and volume, you can calculate work.
Mhm.
So I wanted to know how much mechanical work was being done by the respiratory system and equate that to the changes in VO2 max. So I wanted to have like a mechanism, like I tighten it, mechanical work goes up, and VO2, our energy goes up. So I kind of wanted that intermediate link. And that's something that really strengthened the study, I think.
Mhm.
We also related work and VO2, not a perfect correlation, of course, there's a bunch of other stuff going on. Not all work can be measured. There's isometric work going on. But that is the reason they have those catheters in. Something else I was thinking about that you brought up that I absolutely loved was when a trail runner wears a vest with
Mhm.
their sports bra. And I don't have that in the paper, but instead I
Mhm.
put in for military applications.
Mm.
Military wears heavy backpacks and does a lot of walking. And what
Mhm.
happens when we have multiple um, restrictions in multiple planes, right? All I was changing was, one plane right on the ribs, but you can have it in multiple planes. And so you could get more restriction. And so it could be even a bigger impact for a trail runner, I think.
Mhm.
I know the speeds are slower and ventilation might be lower, but yeah, if you have a heart rate strap on, you got your sports bra and you got a vest, you're starting to put
Mhm.
stuff on your chest.
Yeah, I think I mentioned in a comment on your post was that what I've noticed is like when I'm going uphill, so there's less like bounce from the pack. Like I don't need it as tight. Like I'll open the bottom because it like restricts across your chest, similar to a heart rate monitor or a bra. And so I'll open like the bottom restriction basically, which sits kind of either right below my sports bra or pretty close to my sports bra line, just so that like there isn't that additional restriction going uphill and you can like it's fatiguing to like work
Really.
against that restriction for hours on end.
See, I hope
Mhm.
there's a bunch of young scientists listening. We're giving them a bunch of study ideas.
I
Please go
know.
out and do this. I think you
Totally.
guys also mentioned I only used young women with boob privilege, small boob
Mhm.
privilege. Yeah, women that participate in exercise, I know, they have, breasts of very different sizes. Even your circumference of your trunk can change. So there's many studies that need to be done
Mhm.
on this topic. So yeah, please, more scientists listening, please steal all these ideas and go do them.
Yeah, and Shalaya, I don't think I saw this, but did you end up measuring breast displacement at all during the study?
I did, and we didn't publish it.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, I did have marker balls on it.
Did it
I
change
had a baby, but
significantly?
it was really hard to tell.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
I mean, there's some amount of breast movement that is comfortable, of course.
Mhm.
And so it's like, yeah, it was less in the tight condition. And it was just kind of a little murky finding that wasn't really helping add to the story.
Mhm.
And I think if we had, quantified that to maybe an extent where there was too much boob
Mhm.
displacement and the bra was too loose, I think then that story might have come through a little better.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like you could play around with different like compression levels in the bust and the trunk, right? And
It
then
is
be
the right
like,
amount of movement.
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we try to do that
It's not
at Nike
zero,
too.
right?
Yeah,
Like,
it's
yeah.
definitely
So
not zero. No, there's like an
it's
optimal
a
amount
question
where
that needs to
people
be answered.
hmm Yeah, it's super interesting because I feel like while your study only showed, 1.5% or whatever change, which I think is still relatively significant, especially in the context of trail and ultra running, where that could be 15 to 20 minutes in a 100-mile, right? Which in our competitive sport now, where it's all of a sudden getting really competitive, that could be the difference between third and ninth place. Like
or
so,
finishing, right? The cutoffs are
mhm.
harder for women in
Yep.
general, right? Because at baseline, at the highest end, we're about 10% slower. And so it's like 15, 20 minutes is the difference between like finishing the 30-hour cutoff race or not finishing the 30-hour cutoff race. And that's a big deal.
Yeah, it's really cool.
I guess we should probably take a step backwards too, just to think about like like why sports bras are important, I think, as well, as far as like basic construction of the modern sports bra, let's say, because we know that they came from this like long evolution of like jock straps being re-engineered effectively. Tell us a little bit about why, from like the literature standpoint, and then obviously we all have anecdotal experience as to why they're important, like why sports bras are important and why their current construction is also important.
Okay, so a side story on all that. So okay, when you go through getting a study published, it goes through peer review, which means it's sent out to, anywhere from 2 to 5 experts. They review it, they give you feedback. You guys know this in case anyone else wants to know. They give it back to you, you respond, and then ultimately they decide if your manuscript can be accepted for publication. Anyways, we had a reviewer come back and they said, why wasn't the condition no bra? And I was like, might not be a female. I don't know how to politely say. I did actually pilot that, and I did try to go run on the treadmill at VO2 max without a sports bra. It is super uncomfortable. You can't actually do it. I was in too much pain. So why do we wear bras? To reduce breast pain. And it was just kind of funny having to explain that to someone like, well, we can't do a no bra condition. Like that doesn't make sense. There's no ecological validity to that. Like a woman would never go do that running, I should say. I think you can get away with it on a bike, but in running, there's too much vertical motion of the body, especially at the speeds I had these women at.
I was gonna say, did they try to mansplain sports bras to you? Because that's what I'm imagining is
That's
happening in
that's
this like
kind of
peer
what it
review.
felt like, and you always have to be so polite, right? Because these people at the end of the day decide if the study's gonna be published or not. But you're like, while this is a good idea, we did do pilot testing, and unfortunately, pain was like you're like, no, what are you thinking? Anyways, that was my
That
side
happened
of
at Nike too.
why we yeah, did you? Okay, yeah.
Yep, same
All
comment
the
by an
behind closed door
undisclosed
stuff that
male
you can tell
figure.
now.
Yep.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and if you also think about it, sports bras are relatively new. My dad always still calls it a jog bra to me, and that's because it did, come out from being a jock strap, and then it became a jog bra. And now we refer to it as sports bra. But if on the timeline of, clothing, sports bras are new. And then I think you're also getting into, we have different types. We have like encapsulations with actual cups. We have compression. So, even the types of bras, I think it's still kind of new. Um, and I know you had a listener that, reached out and, they had large breasts and a small circumference of the chest. And my first thought is, I think we need companies to make more bras, actually. Like, I actually don't know if your bra exists yet. And that might be the sad truth is like, we're learning in real time about how important bras are and the effects they can have on, exercise parameters and ultimately performance. And if you want to keep women in sports, we need to have more variety. We need to, look at the vast global diversity of women and actually start making bras for them that fit.
Yeah, and
That was
make
the
them like
question.
not crazy. Like I feel like some of the ones that are like specialty designed, particularly for like larger breasted women, are like also really ugly. And it's just like, come on,
I
like you
want
don't
to
have to
feel good
shrink
in
and
what I'm
pink it, but
wearing.
like at
Yeah.
least don't make me feel like I'm putting on like a piece of military garb to like keep my breasts in place. It's not, yeah, not
Exactly.
ideal.
Um, yeah. So sports bras, we're like still at the really beginning of it, if you ask me. Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna get there slowly but surely. Hopefully faster. Actually,
Yeah.
hopefully surely but very fast, expeditiously even. I think we want to tie this in a little bit to some of the pulmonary physiology research you did at UBC as well early in your PhD. And Keely, do you want to kind of kick that off?
Yeah, sure. So obviously from your study, we see that the sports bra can impact pulmonary physiology. So we were thinking it would be cool for you to walk us through like why this is important and how the pulmonary physiology of females is like unique to begin with, and why having a sports bra that might impact this could be like negative long term.
Yeah. So I told you a lot of my PhD work focused on both sex and age differences, focusing on the respiratory system during exercise. And kind of one of the things that comes out right away when you start looking anatomically at males and females is that women tend to have smaller lungs and smaller airways. And that's even when you try to correct for height. So, you have a 6 foot woman and a 6 foot man, and you put them side by side, that woman is still going to have smaller lungs and smaller airways.
Yeah, you
So
need
then you
space for a
say,
baby. It's all this
and
like
oh my gosh,
it's
yeah, and rib cage dimensions are different too.
yeah.
Yeah, women have these like higher rib cages as well. So the whole shape of it is different compared to men. And you're right, it's for if you need to displace the belly for a baby.
Yeah, I studied this in looking at exercise-induced bronchoconstriction in skiers, and we size matched some of our skiers, and like it was crazy to see, yeah, that they just had like lower, like their forced expiratory volume, even at size match, were never going to be equal because they just women don't have the same lung capacity. It's a I digress. Sorry.
Right. No, you're right on track. So yeah, so those are the anatomical differences. And then those are functional consequences. We know that their forced vital capacity, how much air you can expire forcefully, if you've ever gone into a doctor and done spirometry, how much air comes out in 1 second is different. And then what I got really interested in is, well, what are the metabolic consequences? Because as you're maybe picking up on it, I love energy expenditure, VO2. So particularly, my question was, how much energy do just the respiratory muscles use during exercise? And is there a sex difference? So I isolated just those respiratory muscles, how much you're using to breathe during different intensities of exercise. And what happens is when you get up towards VO2 max, a woman is having to use more energy for her respiratory muscles than a man is. And so if you think about it, you have your whole VO2 max, and let's say it's 40. Well, for a woman, about 13% of that 40 mLs per kg per minute is going just to her respiratory muscles, not her lower leg muscles, which you normally only think about for VO2 max. It has to go to those respiratory muscles. And for a man, say he also has a VO2 max of 40, it's going to be closer to 10%, or maybe he has 15. It's going to be only 10% of that. I should make it a little bigger because they're fractions.
Yeah. But they
Which means,
also, I was gonna say, like, we see that with bronchoconstriction as well, because what that means, like, for those listening, is that if you're running at the same percent of VO2 max as a male, you're generally ventilating at a higher rate. And so when we look at like temperature thresholds for exercise-induced bronchoconstriction risk in Nordic skiers or swimmers, hockey players, etc., like different into like that actually like hits at a different like intensity, a lower intensity for women
lower
because you're
intensity,
working
yes.
harder, or your
Yep.
your muscles are working harder even at like a lower percent of VO2 max, which is very
100% the
frustrating.
same thing. Yes, I know.
Come on, muscles.
But an important sex difference to understand. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Men getting more of that oxygen and blood to their legs while we are not getting it there. We got to feed
Right.
other stuff.
So do you feel like if women are constantly wearing sports bras that are like, too tight around the rib cage and
Kind of exacerbate that
increasing the work, yeah, they're exacerbating that, and
for
like
sure.
long-term health impacts of that are unknown, but could be
Unknown.
vast.
Yeah. Yeah.
So fascinating. Do you have any thoughts of how this might change in a larger busted cohort, like the increased mass moving, um, and like the maybe differences in perception of support or needs for support, like how that might manifest
Oh,
as in their
perception too.
pulmonary system?
Yeah. So the whole reason that first sports bra study we did was on smaller breasted women was I really wanted them to be at fast speeds where they'd have high ventilations.
Hmm.
And if you have someone slower, it's going to be lower ventilations. And so my fear was I'd get to some low ventilations and I wouldn't see an impact. But I actually don't think that's true anymore. I think my original thought was not right. I think that they have enough mass there that to move an extra band would actually be pretty energy provoking. Like they would have to use more energy. And it wasn't all about, the big ventilations that somebody could reach. But yeah, so there's a trade-off, lower ventilations, but more mass to move. I don't know that, but I think it's still there, and I think it still would be significant. If you were to replicate the study in, you know, size D or larger, cup size D or larger, I think you would get similar results actually. I'd love someone to go do that, please.
We're selling studies right now. I love it.
Make us all 10th, 11th, 12th authors, 13th
Yeah.
authors.
I think I'm pretty sure that Chris Napier's lab, which is now like the run lab at Simon Fraser and out of the Surrey campus, I think that they are continuing to do some sports bra research in the next couple of years, and that would be interesting to
I
see
love
if those
Chris Napier.
cohorts. Yeah, he's wonderful.
He's
I'm
great.
curious to see if that will expand out of kind of prototypical sample sizes as far as like looking at larger like breast mass.
I would love it. Yeah.
Chris, you're not listening to this, but if anyone in your lab is,
Napier, come on.
let's do it. Yeah.
Okay, one little last kind of tangent on this topic, and then I want to dive into the postmenopausal years just because we have a lot of postmenopausal listeners, and I think that is super fascinating. But obviously, there's a lot of studies out that emphasize the importance of support, specifically through underband tightness, at lowering the metabolic rate when compared to like extremely low support conditions. However, the studies out on that are pretty, like, there's not that many that actually show metabolic changes based off support level. But because you kind of now have studied, you know, pulmonary physiology in relation to sports bra tightness, and you have extensive experience studying the running economy and biomechanics, how, in your professional opinion, might inadequate sports bra support impact like running mechanics and or running economy in female runners?
Wait, just females or did I go to postmenopausal? I lost.
No, this is just females for now, and then we'll pivot to postmenopausal
Okay.
in a
Okay.
second.
Got it. Got it. Um, yeah. So, and I think I'm probably going to just reiterate what I ended up saying before, but yeah, we know airways are smaller. We know that they're going to use more metabolic energy to breathe. And now when you put a tight sports bra on, maybe you put a tight pack on, maybe you put, you know, a heart rate strap on, I think you're really just exacerbating this even to a greater extent. You know, in the lab, I didn't even let them wear a heart rate monitor. So reviewers are also like, why don't you have heart rate? And I was like, you know, I'm really trying to control how much restrictions on the chest wall. I think it is something of magnitude. And there is a bunch of studies that have done high and low support. I think also what we need to do is define high and low support enough. There's another study by Fong and Powell in, I forget what year now. Oh no, I'm normally good at that. And they found that actually high support people had better metabolic costs. And what I think actually happened in their study was they loosened it too much. And then when the women ran, they needed to bring their arms in to hold their boobs. And if you're running without an arm swing, we also know that's going to increase metabolic cost. So I think really defining what that loose or low support condition is important because it's going to be a U-shaped curve. It's not like we keep loosening it all the way. There's some part that's too loose and there's some part that's too tight. And so really defining where that area is going to be important for females. There's going to be an optimum. It's going to be different for every woman. Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah, I think it's cool that you did like intentionally add that to your sports bras with Lululemon to like be able to measure that restriction because you're right. Like what is loose on A individual is going to be different on B individual is going to be different on C individual,
Exactly.
and you want to standardize that to the
Yes.
best of your ability.
Yeah.
So that's really, come on, science, let's do it.
Hopefully you can replicate this now.
Yeah.
Iterate off
So
this.
yes, exactly. So I guess, yeah, jumping to kind of perimenopausal and menopausal women, because we do have a large listening base kind of that falls into that age group, or falls into that life experience. How might sports bra needs change over time when age is a factor, when we have female athletes moving from perimenopause into menopause?
Okay, so the first thing I never realized was that your breast tissue and your breasts change across the lifespan. And maybe that's really naive of me, right? But yeah, that breast tissue is going to become more lax, it's going to become more elastic. And even like during pregnancy, you're going to have changes like that. So I think there needs to be a part in our life where we stop and reevaluate our sports bras. Maybe it's when you enter perimenopause. Maybe it's after you've given birth and now you realize, hey, that my rib cage has actually changed and I need to reevaluate, you know, what sports bras I'm wearing. The little sports bras I wore in college, I can't fit into those anymore. Like my weight is pretty much the same. And I think I haven't done a DEX in a while, but not a lot of changes. But I think something about having two babies has, you know, displaced my rib cage out more. And, you know, the sports bras that used to feel loose don't feel loose. And I'm like, well, I don't really know. And, you know, your breasts get larger during, you know, breastfeeding and then smaller. And then, just even as you have hormonal shifts later in life, the same things are going to happen. And so I think just stopping and reevaluating what sports bra you're wearing is an important thing to do. It's so easy to be like, yeah, these ones are still in good condition. I wear this size, and just kind of turn off your brain. So I think reevaluating your size is important. Um, the other thing I was going to say is we did look at metabolic cost with aging as well, and also understanding that there are age-related declines, of course, in like some of those functional measures that you mentioned, like forced vital capacity, but also, your lungs actually becoming a little more floppy, and you're actually getting some stiffening of that costal cartilage. And so you might actually start relying on different respiratory muscles during exercise. We normally think of our diaphragm as our primary um, breathing muscle, which it is during rest. But when we start exercising, we have to recruit all those accessory muscles. We have accessory muscles all the way from our sternocleidomastoid all the way down to our abdomen. Those abdominal muscles also can aid in breathing. And so what we've seen with some aging individuals, both males and females, is that you start to get some of that stiffening of the costal cartilage, and you actually start relying more on those lower abdominal muscles to breathe, which I think is totally fine. The only thing I would say is, so make sure you're actually doing maybe a little more core work. You actually are utilizing those muscles more for a good reason. And so, yeah, maybe it's thinking about training different respiratory muscles also.
Super interesting. Not something that I've like actively thought about at all, but obviously there's like changes to pulmonary physiology, changes to muscle mass, etc.
Right.
as
Yeah,
as you age.
exactly. A skeletal muscle is a skeletal muscle, whether it's a respiratory muscle or like a locomotor muscle, like your quads or hamstrings, all the same composition
Yeah.
to an extent.
To an extent, yes, yes. Well, that is our caveat to that. Keely, anything else you want to dive into there on aging and pulm physiology?
I think like maybe my brain went directly to like how is that implicated in a product? And like in your mind, would they have similar experience with a tight band, or would it be more like the crop top type tightness that would impact them more due to where they get their breathing muscles from?
Yeah, I think it would depend on where you would want your underband to lie. Because yeah, I would also love to do that. Compare the bands up here versus if it's, crop top and it's, maybe a little lower and looser, because that's going to have an effect. I was just thinking of something else and I forgot it.
That's okay. No, but I've been thinking about that a lot because like the long line style bra, the crop style bra is really popular right now. And then I have some like older Adidas bras that we were given at one point in time for the team that the band sits much higher than I think a lot of like the more modern bras, and they definitely feel different. And it's not, I don't, one necessarily isn't better than the other in that regard. I've got like a very boxy rib cage and a very short torso, so cropped things can get pretty weird pretty quickly. But yeah, I do think that like where that band sits is a very interesting piece of that puzzle.
Yeah, we got to add that into studies as well. Sorry, I'm giving you more questions than answers.
No worries.
No, good studies do.
Yeah.
Good. I think good studies, obviously you want to answer a question, but good studies, I think, prompt more curiosity and more research versus kind of being like, okay, bow on it, all done. Like
Yeah.
that's not effective.
And a study that tries to answer every question under the sun, there's probably something wrong with it. Something I think about. Yeah.
I had a quick question. I know we're almost running out of time, but like I've always noticed the weight. I know like the weight of something on your chest of a sports bra, especially when you're breathing hard and heavy. I'm thinking of even with the pack and then like a sports bra. I noticed certain bras just way more, especially if they're bigger breasted women, it's more material. Like can that impact things too? Because I mean, and obviously men versus women of the uniforms that we're running in, like there's all these other different things that I think yeah, those are the questions that my brain goes to too.
Okay. Short answer. Yes. Chest mass definitely plays a role in it, right? If you have more
Yeah.
mass or even more breast tissue, right? That's more
Yes.
on the
Yeah.
thorax. So something we thought about doing at one point was doing our sports bra study, but doing it in men. But then we were like, oh, how do we account for the extra breast tissue? And we'd have to put like implants in there. But yeah, so actually mass really does matter. And that's another confounding variable that we need to start controlling for too. Yeah.
Mm.
So I
Cool.
guess kind of stemming from there, final question before we let you go. We're down to the wire here.
Yeah.
You're now at the Mayo Clinic as a researcher. Any future studies that you're working on that you can tease, or kind of what are you up to right now?
Yes, and I'm glad you set me up for that. I'm working with this phenomenal cardiologist. Her name's Dr. Catherine Larson, and we are both former athletes. And we're really interested in that master's athlete specifically. So we've defined masters anyone from 40 to 60 years old, and we're looking for people that would be interested in completing a survey-based study. These are people that would have a lifelong history of endurance exercise, training, competition. We really want to just kind of understand more of what's happening for cardiovascular health, especially to that postmenopausal women. There's so little data out there. What's happening to their heart structure, function. And so we're trying to set up a survey, or we've set up a survey, and we want to create a registry. If anyone out there is listening and you fit into that 40 to 60 age category, you're a lifelong exerciser, you have a computer and can fill out survey. It's a little extensive. The link is www.mayoclinic.org/athlete. We would be really grateful. We also know we're looking for like kind of a weird population of, high endurance exercisers. So we're hoping that it will be kind of trickled down. Word of mouth is how the survey will get out. Yeah.
You've come to the right place.
That's one of the things we're doing. Yeah.
Trail and ultra runners
I
are
know. And I was like,
that sweet
they're
spot.
the best people, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm so fascinated in this space as well. So you'll have to keep me posted how all this goes.
Yeah. We'll share it
Help out
widely.
science. Yeah.
We will put it in the show notes as well. So
thank you.
Well, thank you
Yeah,
for your
of
time
course.
today. This was
Thank you so
awesome.
much for
Yeah,
having
this
me
is
on
so
Trail
awesome.
Society. I have loved this, and I will keep listening to you as well.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. You're so kind.
So cool. Yeah. Learned a
Great.
lot. More studies.
Thanks for letting me go on all the tangents. I appreciate it. I tend to ramble, I know.
Shalaya Kipp, what a phenomenal human being. Again, added to our list of recurring guests. Her and Emily Krause can come back whenever they want.
Yeah, I really hope people take her up on some of those research ideas. They were phenomenal, and there's so much to be learned in this space.
Yeah, we do have a lot of young graduate students who listen, who have pinged us before about things. So that's incredibly exciting. And again, check out the link in our bio if you are a master's athlete between the age of 40 and 60 and have been a lifelong endurance athlete. I know it's an intensive survey or an extensive survey, but you should definitely, in the name of science, give them 30 minutes of your time.
Mm-hmm.
And in the name of science, be your own guinea pig. I mean, I think that like one of those takeaways was, I think we mentioned it last time, like self-selecting. We might be self-selecting a bra size that's too tight. So like, let's do some measurements and see. Let's play around with it maybe a little bit.
Agreed, 100%. Well, as we dive into our society slam for today, we also have to give a shout out again to the folks over at the feed. We're kind of in that like witching hour where it's like, do I eat lunch before I go for my run, or do I eat a snack before I go for my run? And we've got some waffles still stashed away in the freezer. So you know me, I'm gonna go pop one of those bad boys into the toaster oven upstairs and then smother it in nut butter of some sort and take that energy with me on the run. Any other snacks that you guys are gonna be enjoying this afternoon?
Well, another something, because it's been so hot here in France and I'm not used to humidity. I've actually been like the Never Second gels or just some other gels. Maybe you're not supposed to do this, but like just putting them in the fridge. Definitely the Never Second gels. You freeze them and then you bring them, and it's just like an ice pop. Oh, it's so good. It's really good.
I love that.
And it
Keely.
encourages me to like eat early.
You're like, they'll melt if I don't eat them.
Exactly.
Keely, what about you? You eating a snack before you have lunch?
Good question. I mean, the feed is my source of snacks pre-lunch. So if I am going to have a snack, it's going to be a feed snack, but I haven't decided quite yet because I might not be running until later. So I might actually just have lunch.
Fine. Fine. Well, again, you can go over to www.thefeed.com/Trail Society to get some credits today to spend on some bonus snackies. Well, let's dive into the Society Slam this week. Speaking of bras, we had some listeners write in for our large busted, narrow rib cage gal that was asking for advice. And they said, bra advice for my 32E sister, Brooks. This is the second recommendation I think we've had for the Brooks bras, which used to be Moving Comfort, and then Brooks kind of like fully enveloped each other. They said they have sizing in band and cup, so versus small, medium, large, which never works for us. And their sizes include options for those of us in the small rib cage, large cup club. I'm 32 double D and it fits true to size for me. I also buy 34 double D for long ultras for when the band starts to feel too tight. Hope that helps. I know it's tough. And I'll just do this next one as well. Again, another recommendation for this gal. So hopefully something works for you. They said thanks to you all. I'm writing for the girl with the small rib cage and the big boob problem. Hi, same. I actually found a sports bra with a band and cup size on Peloton website. So again, moving away from that small, medium, large, and looking for that kind of that band size, that that 32, for example, up to double D, E. And they said she was able to get 34 double D. Via the Peloton website. Peloton often collabs with really high-end brands and has amazing sales that seem to happen like every 3 days. And that the brand really fit better than anything they've experienced thus far.
Nice.
Yeah,
Keely, you want to take that first question?
Sure. Okay, we have someone asking a question about recovery. It starts off with, hey ladies, and hi Keely. I know this person. Love the pod. Question for a future episode. I just completed my first ultra, the Silver Rush 50 miler. Thanks, Coach Hannah. Shout out, all good. I'm curious about thoughts on race recovery during the season, how to return to activity/intensity, fueling in the days after an ultra. Obviously, it will be very dependent on the person, but I put so much effort into fueling during training, hello carbs, race week and the race, but gave zero thought to how to mindfully come out the other side while still in summer and not the off season. Thanks for all the great work. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think that I mean, even though you're not in the off season yet, that week post race is kind of like a little mini off season. Like you really got to take care of your body. I'm not one to say, oh, avoid this or don't do that during that time period. I think you need to listen to what your body's telling you, listen to those cravings. You might not be hungry immediately post race, but I find that 24, 48, 72 hours post race, I'm ravenous. And I think it's like, don't restrict yourself because you're not training that week. I think that you really need to make sure that you're staying on top of giving yourself lots of good carbs, lots of good protein, because your body is doing a lot of repair work at that time period. But it'd be a really great question if we do another episode with a dietitian, for example, to specifically talk about that kind of post race, but you're not at the end of your season yet, just going on a fun, not a bender, maybe a cake bender, but trying to figure out what that happy medium is.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe this isn't like the appropriate, like, okay, and I'm not thinking about this with food in particular, but yes, I think fueling exactly like what Corrine said, but I think neurologically and like from a psychological standpoint, like doing these hard things, you have to reward yourself, or else like I think you can fall out of these habits, or just it can like lead to burnout, right? And I think like to find a way post race to really celebrate the achievement of just finishing the race, to really like give yourself that reward. And like it can be a cake bender, it can be a sleep bender, it can be just something like that you've looked forward to, that's like that off time from running. I think that is something that has helped me, but I think it can be this like reinforcement of like rewarding yourself for doing these hard things.
Yeah, and I'm not a huge fan of like reward systems because I feel like for some individuals that's like risky behavior, right? But at the same time, I think
Celebrate.
it's yeah, a
Okay.
celebration of like
Yeah.
doing this hard thing. That might mean just like laying horizontally for a long time.
Right. And like I get exactly what you're saying. Like the reward thing, it can be tricky because like, oh, if I didn't finish how I wanted, still like celebrate the achievement, celebrate like doing this hard thing. It's like, yeah, that's a better word. The better way to put it is like find something that like makes you happy, to be like, yay, I achieved a goal, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think don't put like a timeline on how you're supposed to recover. Like it could be that it takes you a week to feel normal. It could be that it takes you 3 weeks. And I think even if it's not your off season where you're not planning to run anymore for quite some time and not race imminently, that it's okay to take the extra time and not put a timeline on it, because I think when we rush back from a race, it will just catch up to us later. So I think,
Right.
acknowledge that you crushed it. You ran a race, you ran 50 miles, your body carried you 50 miles. Most people cannot say that. And so appreciate that. And then just give your body the time it needs, and listen to it, just like Corinne and Hillary both said, and yeah, fuel up.
Nice.
Yeah.
Hillary, you want to take this next question?
Society Slam question. I love how much you discuss periods and how having healthy periods is important for health and performance on the pod. Just wondering about any advice you might have about how to manage periods during the long run. when you maybe have a heavy flow, but need to be out for 5, 7, 9 hours on the trails. Are pads better than tampons? What if we need to do an exchange halfway through the run? In general, what kinds of strategies do women use to handle that?
Yeah,
I'll go
super
ahead and
individual.
say, yeah, it is super individual. I use the Diva Cup. And you can use different ones that kind of like can last for different, lengths of time. That can be really typical, but that's something I use like camping, and it can be, and or just for long runs, especially because sometimes I've had, my period actually quite often during when I'm racing. So yeah, but to be honest, and if it's an issue of like changing it during a race or a long run, if you're kind of like out on the trail and you don't have, I can bring little things to kind of like clean it, and like sanitize my hands, for like reinsertion. But like sometimes in a race, I just let it bleed on my shorts and just use more lube, and people just have to deal with it of the aesthetic look. So that's how I deal with it.
Yeah, I think it's once again, it's like I have period privilege. I have really light periods, but
Mm.
that still means that sometimes I've got, if I'm out there for a very long time, I'm doing something like changing a tampon, akin to pack it in, pack it out policies, right? Being, just like what kind of waste you're leaving out in the woods. I know Trail Sisters has put something together on this regard, but yeah, like carrying a little like kind of like sanitary pack. So that might be a little Ziploc baggie that has like some wet wipes or something to sanitize your hands with, etc. And a new tampon, a little wrap that you can put that old tampon in, for example, if that's what you're using. And then you're gonna Ziploc it back up and put it back in your pack, and you're gonna dispose of it later. Because we don't want to leave things like that, sanitary napkins or tampons out in the woods. That's not cool either. So I'll do that. Like oftentimes if I'm on a really long run, I've been having GI issues, for example. It's day one of my period. I'll even carry like a mini thing of like a mini thing of hand sanitizer and like toilet paper and whatnot in like a little Ziploc bag. So I've got my bathroom kit with
Mhm.
me. It's just the reality of doing long adventures.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've definitely had to pack like 2 or 3 tampons before on a run because I also have a pretty heavy flow. And while it's not ideal, you just peel off on the trail, change it, pack it in, carry it on you. Normally put it in a Ziploc baggie in the back of the pack, so you don't have to
Yep.
like have it up front. It's kind of gross.
Yep.
But yeah, it's not ideal. I don't think there's a better option right now, at least for really heavy flow. I think the cup would probably not be sufficient for me, but I've never used it because I'm nervous. So if anybody else has and they have really heavy flows, let us know.
Yeah, curious to see kind of what people's personal take is on there. Just like the bra recommendations. Let us know what you have done in this situation. If you are someone that has a heavy flow, how you handle that on long races and on long runs. We had a shout out regarding hormones and birth control, and they said just listening to the most recent episode, and you mentioned asking people if they are on hormonal birth control, if applicable. They said I don't know what other kind of questions about types of hormones you may ask, but it might be worth broadening the question or adding other ones for people who may be on hormones because of perimenopause and menopause. An example of that on my side is that I've got a number of athletes on estrogen replacement, for example, who are going through that time period, or because they're trans, and keep up the great work. So that is something to consider, I think, for coaches. Just like how do you ask those questions? And again, I send the same intro doc to the male identifying athletes and the female identifying athletes that I coach, so that those questions are on every single intake form.
Mm.
And then who wants to do our final shout out?
And the final shout out is from a listener in Australia. They said, "Hello, I am an avid listener of the podcast and I ran my first 50K yesterday at the Guzzler in Brisbane, Australia." That's an awesome name. The whole race, I kept hearing big dogs gotta eat. And when I was tired, I kept being so thankful that I was properly fueled. I love all the energy of the podcast. And as a medical school student, shout out to you because that'll be me soon. I appreciate the research coverage. I can't wait to be a supportive doctor for women athletes. Keep up all the amazing work. You're inspiring so many. And I hope I can meet y'all at a race back in the US after my school. Thank you for
Yay!
that. And thank you for wanting to be a supportive doctor to women athletes. That's exciting.
Yeah,
So
big
cool.
dogs gotta eat. We're
Big
gonna
dogs
rock
gotta
that
eat.
energy for forever and ever. Okay, on that note, thank you so much for joining us for this long episode. Hopefully it's taken you on a nice mega run. We were part of your long run this weekend. If you're on a long run right now, have you eaten recently?
You should have eaten at least 4 times.
Yeah, you need to, I hope you ate many gels during this episode. And on that note, we'll see you all soon out on the trails. Until next time, bye y'all.